have organization to use to terrorize voters. This is
2 points. What are you saying? That we will not engage in, let's say, they say it takes money to be able to run a campaign, even if it's not for purposes of buying votes, just for the organization, your watchers, for example, no? the organization people that are going to distribute your sample ballots and things like that. How are you going to fund that if you say that you're not going to engage in those same kinds of tactics?
Now, first of all, let's start always with what the law says. The law says, the election code, that a candidate, particularly for presidential office, is allowed to spend a certain sum for every voter. So we've got to ask ourselves, how many voters are there in the country today? According to the census office, apparently about 30 million. But of the 30 million, only about 25 or 20 are expected to go to the polls. If that is the case, we must multiply the ceiling set by the election code by the number of voters. This ceiling is 3 pesos, 1 peso 50 centavos on the part of the candidate, and an equivalent amount on the part of the political party to which he belongs. So 2 amounts of the same figure, 1 peso 50 centavos, comes to 3 pesos per voter. 30 million times 3 pesos is 90 million. That is the legal ceiling. Yet these candidates are going around Metro Manila openly boasting that they are prepared to spend 1 billion to 28 billion pesos for the election. Flying exactly in the face of this legal provision. What kind of president will these people make? They have not even been elected president yet, and they are already indicating with impunity how they shall violate the law. What I am saying is, I will try very hard to raise 90 million pesos from financial contributors precisely as allowed by the election code. And yet at the same time, I will try very hard to convince the COMELEC to exercise its constitutional power of recommendation to the Congress so that it will recommend that Congress should raise the ceiling at least on presidential campaigns, because 90 million is simply unrealistic.
Are you confident that you can raise whatever it is that will be required or authorized in order to make a go of it?
Oh yes, definitely. Because there are certain sectors of our society that are habituated to making financial contributions. In other words, this business knows that it has to underwrite the cost of an election in any democratic system. This happens everywhere in the world. This is not peculiar to the Philippines by any means. And a businessman or a business group that has been traditionally making contributions to presidential candidates already has a fixed modus operandi for this. In the first place, disabuse yourself of the impression that they will give money only to one candidate. They'll give money to 2 or 3 candidates, sometimes even to everybody if they can afford it.
Okay. All right. When we come back from this break, I'd like to go to the second portion, which is that the practitioners of a pragmatic brand of politics keep on talking about organizations and the grassroots. Let's talk about that when we come back. Question of those that practice a pragmatic form of politics and talk about grassroots organization. These are the people that are going to be out there on election day, actually making sure that the votes that are registered for you are actually counted. No? How fast is the People's Reform Party moving in that direction? And some people are saying it's not really that easy to build an organization, and sometimes it's too late to build an organization. What is your response to that?
If I listen to all of these cynics, I would be paralyzed into self-hysteria. But the thing is that we've been organizing since 1990 last year when I first left the government. We organized the Movement for Responsible Public Service, our civic crusade against graft and corruption. This movement already has 250,000 registered members. And when we filed an application with COMELEC in April 12 of this year for registration of the People's Reform Party, almost automatically we had about 180,000 U.S. members simultaneously apply for membership also with the People's Reform Party. So as of this day, even as I speak to you, we have 180,000 members.
Okay, well, let's talk about what you would like to do and what the issues probably will be in 1992. We don't have much time, so I want to ask you, what do you think is the most important problem that you are going to tackle first thing as soon as you reach Malacanang?
Well, there has to be a two-pronged approach immediately. The president cannot afford to prioritize and take his time going down his shopping list. So there are two things that the president must address with a sense of urgency. The first is the peace and order situation, and second, and concurrently, the second item on the agenda is the economy.
Okay, let's go to the economy, because peace and order, we'll talk about that already a little bit. But economy, when we talk about the economy, and poverty, of course, being the most important problem there, the problem, what is the first, give me an example of one project that you would immediately implement in order to lift that particular problem.
I would immediately enhance the export trade. I would shorten the exclusion list in the present Foreign Investment Incentives Act of 1999.
Export in particularly what areas? Are you thinking of any particular area that you would like to go faster than others, or is it going to be a broad-based, wide approach to export?
Export in general, simply to bring foreign exchange into the country. In fact, the approach should be three-pronged, not only to promote exports, but also to liberalize investment climate and to develop tourism, because these are the three quick routes for attracting foreign exchange.
Would we go so far as to devalue Philippine currency in order to make our exports cheaper and therefore probably generate more exports?
Promoting the export trade is not a simple matter of tinkering with the exchange rate. To promote the export trade, we must supply at least four factors. We must factor four elements into the equation. The first is the supply of credit. The second is technology. The third is marketing assistance, and the fourth is bureaucratic support.
So you would not immediately, because some people have counseled that maybe one of the quickest ways to do it is just kind of devalue the currency in order to attract further exports, to make us more competitive with the international market. You don't think that's necessary?
It would be helpful, but it's extremely superficial.
Okay. In order to fight the poverty problem, some people have been saying that there's too much of our national budget that is being devoted to debt service, almost 40% of that. Would you agree, or would you even bat for, let us say, a debt cap? Would you bat for, let us say, a selective repudiation of debts, particularly the so-called behest loans? Would you do something or other form that to kind of reduce the amount of that's being paid for our foreign creditors, not to mention domestic creditors, and use that money for projects here in this country?
But first, let's clarify the debt question. The debt burden of the country has two components, the foreign debt and the domestic debt. Now, it is not widely known that the total debt burden to a large extent consists not of the foreign but of the domestic debt. Domestic debt accounts for about 70% of the total debt burden. Only 30% consists of the foreign debt. So, it is not a solution to the debt problem as a whole to advocate that we must relieve on our debt. And I am strongly opposed as a lawyer to this position. I am opposed to a debt moratorium or to a debt cap. Because when we were in law school down, and we were at about the same time too, we were immediately taught when we were taking contracts in freshman or sophomore year that the linchpin of the judicial system is the principle Vanda Rebus Extensibus. Treaty obligations must be performed in good faith. And besides, this is not a mere theoretical proposition. We have the concrete examples of Peru and other Latin American countries who reneged on their debt and immediately afterwards found to their shock that their official trade credits, official development assistance, and even scholarships and fellowships had all dried up. They could not even obtain imports of capital machinery and other necessary elements for domestic manufacturing. In other words, we do not live in an autarkic society. We are not economically self-sufficient. We contracted those debts. We are bound to pay them. The best we can do is maybe renegotiate or restructure the debt, maybe negotiate for debt relief and exchange for some blue chip we might be holding, maybe the military bases. But to renew them, the debt is very short-sighted and in the long run very counterproductive.
So you would hold the line, even if you had some recalcitrant senators who keep pounding the desk talking about debt reduction and maybe some kind of unilateral action, you would hold the line, even against some people like groups like a Foreign Debt Coalition that would be demonstrating in the streets. You would not agree to any kind of unilateral action insofar as debt is concerned, debt service is concerned.
I will not only stand firm, I shall exert myself to try and educate people who are apparently non-educable.
Okay. Let me ask you, would you maintain, would you preserve, would you continue the PCGG when you're elected president?
The PCGG is an idea whose time has gone. There is no idea as powerful as an idea whose time has come. But conversely, there is no idea as powerless as an idea whose time has gone. The PCGG belongs to the latter category. It must be retired and placed on the shelf.
What are those not pending cases?
Well, then you must have to wind them up. Just like corporate 10 years.
Imelda Marcos, would you be in favor of her return here?
Oh yes, definitely, because she's a Filipino. She is therefore protected by the Bill of Rights. Article 3, Section 6 provides, neither shall the right to travel be impaired except in the interest of national security, public safety, or public health, as may be provided by law. So those who seek to prevent her return to the country must prove, one, that the prevention of her entry into the country is necessitated either by national security, public safety, or public health, and furthermore, they must prove in addition that there is a law that gives them the authority to do so.
Does it make a difference to you whether or not cases are actually filed right now, or would you allow her in whether or not the cases are filed?
I'd allow her in whether or not, because we have to ask ourselves, pursuant to the Constitution, does she represent jeopardy to national security? For if that is so, then the administration will be admitting that one person has the capacity to rock the security of the country. Who is this person? We want to see her. Or does she jeopardize public safety or public health? Does he suffer from some communicable disease? I imagine that's an open-ended question insofar as her critics are concerned. But I would resolve the doubt in her favor.
All right, we have a couple of minutes or maybe a minute or so left, and I'd like to give you free rein insofar as answering one question is concerned. You talk a lot about vision, and you talk a lot about how the Filipino should be in the future. What is your vision of the Filipino in light of all these problems we're having? We have a terrible reputation worldwide. We are known to be a people that allegedly cannot get its act together. We are known to be a people that squandered opportunities, dissipated resources, and probably not so good in terms of running things. We talk a lot, and we know how to talk about very well, and we're both good orators, good singers, but somehow when it comes to trying to make life better in this country, we fall short. How do you intend to change that? And what's your vision of the Filipino that's going to be a world citizen, a citizen of this particular, of this universe, 1992 and the 21st century?
It is the adversity is a test of character. National adversity in which we find ourselves today will therefore be a test of national character. I would analyze the problem in this manner. What is wrong with the Philippines? Is it a dearth of natural resources, such as they suffer in Singapore, for example, which has zero natural resources, or like Hong Kong? And yes, no, because the Philippines is one of the world's richest appointed countries in terms of natural resources. God's munificence is almost endless in this tropical paradise. So we are rich in natural resources. Next question. Is it human resources that we lack? Are we born with some enfeeblement of the human mind or the human will that we cannot seem to progress? Answer. Some of our professionals are considered the best in the whole world. Filipino musicians are considered geniuses everywhere they perform, and so on. Again, the answer is, in terms of human resources, there is no lack. There is an embarrassment of riches. If we are rich in natural resources, if we are rich in human resources, then what is it that we lack? Why are we considered the tail ender in Southeast Asia, in fact, to be the most corrupt government in Asia today? Why is this so? Answer, what is lacking in the Philippine scenario, what is not found in the Philippine landscape, is a sense of shared destiny. That is what the next president of the Philippines must apply to his people, the sense of shared destiny. I hope I shall be able, not only because of will, but also because of my track record, what I have done in the past, be able to furnish this deficiency in the system. I would end by saying I am perfectly familiar in my consciousness with the warning that those in the gods will destroy the first attempt to run for president of the Philippines. So I hope I do not make a similar mistake.
Okay, on that note, thank you very much for being with us in this hour-long discussion of a lot of issues that we've tried to really go very, very quickly on tonight, but really as a way of showing your thinking on a lot of these very basic issues which affect the Filipinos. And I'd like to say that welcome back. You're back running again, and you're back in full swing, and I think many of the people that you direct your speeches and cooperate too will have something to be concerned about in the coming months. So on that note, thank you very much, Willa, and thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, for being with us this evening. Until next week.